Where's the dog? Where's the dog? See, hey, JJ, get it over here, JJ. Oh, what's that, a kitty?
Ma.
No. Not where's the kitty. Is that a kitty? Oh,
No.
what is it? It's a dog, yes.
When we found out he was deaf, we found out in kind of an unusual way. We were like on an assembly line, and we had seen a doctor, and we had gone up for an audiogram. When we came back downstairs, we were in a corridor with about 50 people, and the doctor came out in the corridor and said, yes, no question about it, he's deaf. And that was it. That was the end of the conversation. We had to make plans for more testing. And we got on the elevator, and we cried on the way home, and we really didn't know what to do.
There's really nothing to be anything about it today, but just sad that the kid's different,
This engineering student, Alan Gifford, was born on March 1st, 1952. A year later, when he did not speak, it was realized he was profoundly deaf. He is one of the 2 million people in the U.S. who are profoundly deaf. They may sense some sounds and distortions, but they cannot make out their own or anyone else's voice. What can a child born deaf today expect? What chances are there that they will achieve what Alan Gifford has achieved, that they will overcome the fundamental problem facing the deaf, that of communication?
Hearing peoples in general do not understand the problems of the deaf, especially in communication. Most hearing people think that deaf, or it means you just can't hear, that's all. But it's really more than that.
This is a recording of the human voice made by acoustic scientist Ed Vilchor. The distortion is the way he thinks the profoundly deaf hear speech, although at a much lower volume than this. Ann Bergen has been profoundly deaf in one ear since a car accident. She is verifying Ed Vilchor's work by comparing normal speech in her bad ear with the distorted speech in her good ear. The reason for the distortion is that profound deafness lies in the nerve system of the inner ear. Here, millions of cells discriminate incoming sounds. Damage to the system before birth or through disease, old age, or excessive noise is irreversible. Many profoundly deaf people wear hearing aids to pick up minute cues of speech, or at least to tell them when they are in the presence of sound. To speak as Alan Gifford speaks is a great achievement.
One sandwich? And your potato chip?
For how do deaf people make words they cannot hear? And without words, how can they develop ideas?
Deaf people do not have language to express themselves or their problems. For example, we can't express our basic needs.
After all, 20 years ago, the average vocabulary level of 19-year-olds in schools and programs for the deaf throughout the United States was about where it is now, below third grade. The reading comprehension level is still about fourth grade, fourth month. Now, I think that implies the necessity of desperation among educators of the deaf.
Alan Gifford is graduating from the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. As such, he is one of a tiny percentage of profoundly deaf people to graduate from college. Once they leave, these students will find it difficult to get jobs to match their qualifications. Alan Gifford was frequently turned down because he could not use the telephone. Communicating is the basic challenge that the deaf face. Among themselves, they can use sign language, but few hearing people know it. It raises an issue that bitterly divides educators of the deaf.
The role of the deaf child in society is whatever that child can make of life with the tools that we've given him. And the tools that we give him is determined to a large extent, not by his deafness, but by the type of program that's available for his teaching. If we put a child in a signing environment, even a normal child, he's not going to learn to talk, he's going to learn to sign. If we put a child in a talking environment, he's going to learn to talk because that's the way that things are. He's going to have to talk. And it's not cruel to do that. We all have to work and struggle towards achievement.
That is a frequent assumption of people who can hear, that they know best what people who can hear need or should have. That many people, including myself, who try to integrate in society, we are giving a very full set of values. According to Daniel Lang, I should associate with people not because I like them, not because I have the same interests in common, but because they can hear. I can't think of a sillier set of values in my life than to say you should associate with somebody because he can hear.
Alan Gifford is one of the few deaf people who escape this tension, who can move easily between the deaf and hearing worlds, signing and speaking worlds. He is one of a small handful of people born deaf who can do this. It is the result of a long and painful process of learning the techniques of language step by step.
JJ, go for a ride.
Ba.
Go for a ride.
Da.
Go for a ride.
What happens in a normal home, and this is also true everywhere, is that you overhear many, many things. And these things relate to the social development of the individual. You learn how your mother and father fight with each other, if you wish, or how they handle a specific situation by hearing it. The deaf child does not learn this. Does not learn what's happening in the other room when his sister is screaming at his brother either. But when you are deaf, you have to develop everything a little bit at a time, and often it never happens first because you don't have the proper frame of communication.
This is the Clark School in Northampton, Massachusetts. It's as good a school as parents could find if they did not wish their child to sign.
We believe that most deaf children who do not have other handicapping conditions, such as mental retardation or emotional disturbance, are capable of getting their basic education orally. This means not using finger spelling or signs, but using speech and lip reading. We have been educating deaf children for 110 years now, and from our own direct knowledge of the children, and also from the experience of the graduates of the school, we are confident that this is so.
Let's think about the chart. What's the chart about?
Hot cocoa.
It's about hot cocoa. Okay, let's see. Who can come tell me the sentence? Okay, Carolyn?
Cookie bad cold water.
Right. Christine, fill the pitcher with cold water.
Cookie bad cold water.
Okay, but you forgot part of it. What about Christine?
Cookie.
Fill the pitcher. Listen, fill the pitcher with cold water.
Cold water.
Okay, let's do the whole thing.
cookie, bath, down have clean, hot water.
The microphone linked direct from the teacher to the children's hearing aids amplifies the tiny fragments of distorted sound they hear. Beyond this, they must concentrate on what they see by lip reading.
Good morning.
Good morning.
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 Get up here.
John Wilcox is 10. During his time at the school, he will have at least 3,000 hours of individual speech training, learning the mouth movements of the words he cannot hear. With the school's head therapist, Miss Oshimbolt, he is learning to feel the breath stream made by different sounds, using a mirror to recognize the lip movements.
Pretty good. Make it tight. E. Okay, can you use a bigger voice? Try it with this one. That's much better. Let's try this. It's not the same. Better. You have to think about it. Okay, John. Remember to pause. I want you to pause.
Hey, you
have to give the S.
I think that the world is not likely to accommodate itself or change itself around to accommodate the deaf that much. For instance, practically all of us talk. And this is our standard means of communicating among all people. And I think that most people out in the world generally cannot either transmit or receive manual means of communication. So that's really what we're attempting. Our goal is to make it possible for the deaf to fully participate in the world as it is.
At the Clark School, the children are resident from age of 4 to 16.
This morning, when we were talking in school about President Carter and the new administration and his cabinet, do you remember the picture I showed you of the new Secretary of State who was sitting down at his desk? What's his name? Cyrus. Cyrus Vance, that's right. Who's the new secretary?
At the school, we talked to 2 of the 16-year-old students who are about to enter hearing high schools. How do you feel about Clark School, Diane?
I feel fine. It's better for me to talk, so I can talk with hearing people. So I can talk to hearing people so they can understand instead of sign language.
Do you ever have to use notes with hearing people?
No.
And you, Keith?
Most of the time I try to talk. And sometimes the older people I'm probably listening. And the salesperson gave me people in person. I said, no way I'm working talking. And later on, she found out, she know what I mean. And so I found something. And that made me feel better.
What about sign language?
Real sign language. We have about 5 morning. Number 1,
Number 1 is like, when I talk to the principal and find out to that, and the second way, and they take the parents here, and tell the parents, find them here.
what is really an indictment, I think, on our profession has been the fact that there are children leaving our schools today with precisely the same sort of errors, precisely the same problems in speech, precisely the same low levels of intelligibility. 1 word in 5 understandable today. And so that there has, in fact, been in many areas in our schools for the deaf, no tangible progress at all. You tell me, I want to work with you. You tell me that.
I want to be with you.
Yeah.
Daniel Ling is a leading advocate of the oral approach. He has written the first textbook on speech training in 30 years.
Work with you.
I want to be with you.
In the past, many teachers of the deaf have taught sounds in isolation. And instead of realizing that speech is not something that is a process where sounds are strung together like beads on a string, but sounds that interact one with the other. For example, if I said the word cab, I could say cab. But if I said the word cab driver, the B at the end of cab is no longer released cab, it's cab driver. I've used a stop rather than a plosive. Now, many children in the past have been taught that the letter B written on the blackboard says B. And if they're taught in this way, then they say cab driver. Cab driver.
Cab driver.
Yeah, she's missing some of the sounds. Say, ut.
Hush, hush, hush.
Us. You see, she's not making a stop. Now I want you to say, up.
Up,
That's lovely. Up.
up,
That's lovely. Now we're going to do it with a T. We're going to say, up.
hush,
No, okay, ut.
hush,
No, where's a t, 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 ta, ta, ta.
hush, hush,
Okay.
up,
Yeah, you're saying up, and I don't want it like that. I want you to say up and stop. That's good. Again, up, up, 3 times.
up.
Daniel Ling is helping deaf children like Diane Gill in communicating with the hearing world.
Very good.
But when she reads lips, the information is limited. Many sounds look alike.
I set out to make spoken English as clear to the deaf child through vision as it is to the hearing child through his hearing. Well, that means that whereas the hearing child can discriminate among the sounds of speech by hearing the differences, the deaf child must be able to discriminate among them by seeing differences.
And he told the king that he had a daughter who could spin straw into gold.
This is not sign language, but a new system developed by Dr. Cornett called cued speech. A deaf person who lip reads can see only about 1/3 of the information necessary for full understanding. This system moves the hand and fingers to discriminate between similar lip movements that make different sounds.
Consonant sounds like M, P, and B, as in ma, pa, ba, look alike on the lips, different on the hands. If you noticed, ma, pa, ba. Cued speech is a very simple system since there are only 8 cues to learn. Now, they're not the same as signs. And cued speech has nothing to do with sign language. It is not a form of sign language. It's an oral method, basically, which uses a bit of support from the hands to make the sounds clear.
What did you do when you went camping?
Dr. Cornett argues that cued speech can be learned much more quickly than sign language. But these children are still limited to communicating with people who know the system.
Any method that requires the hearing person to learn a special skill in order to communicate with the deaf would leave the deaf person with a small world, because only a small percentage of people would learn it. So I set out to develop an electronic instrument the deaf person can wear that will give him cued speech, the cue part of cued speech, from the sound of the other person's voice. Now, in that system, the cues of the hands are replaced by bars of light in the patterns that you see on the little calculators, the little figure-8 patterns with which you can make all of the numbers. The deaf person has to wear glasses. We have on the pair of glasses a tiny little mirror. it reflects the light from the light-emitting diodes here so that he sees the cues in the air in front of him. Here's the way it looks.
Mother will bake a pie.
But this is experimental. For the moment, lip readers must rely on limited visual information to make contact with the outside world.
Mother is baking a pie.
December 6th, 1976, Alvord Desert, Oregon. The driver of this car is Kitty O'Neill, breaking the woman's land speed record. Kitty O'Neill is deaf.
Oh, it feels good. I was so happy to break the land speed record. But the only thing I want to break is the world record. But that I want me to, so when I meant to break the world record, and I got hurt. I got up 618. But the world record is 622. But I'm not going to give up. But I'm going to fight. Just like being deaf, overcome and you got to fight. Like a challenge to conquer. That's what it's all about. Just like reading.
Kitty O'Neill is a particularly successful example of someone who has had an oral education. Now a Hollywood stunt woman living north of Los Angeles, she attended an oral school started by her mother.
My mom never wanted me to learn how to sign language. She wanted me to talk to other people, like hearing people.
To Kitty O'Neill, as to many oral deaf people, deafness is a handicap to be overcome. Signing deaf people see it as a human difference to be accepted.
When I was young, anyway, sign language was considered a very sinful thing, something to be ashamed of and practiced only in corners or out of sight. Part of this reason, I think, was the fact that the educators of the deaf would insist that if people sign, they will never learn to speak or use English in proper order. And much of this also was due to the fact that in the old days, anyway, I'm not so young, you know, there were many people like me who became deaf after we acquired the language. And because of this, we had a great deal of advantage over people who were born deaf. So we would be appearing in graduation exercises and making speeches. And people would say, look at that boy. He speaks beautifully. His language is excellent. One of these days, my kid is going to talk like that boy. Nobody tells those parents that I wasn't born deaf, or we weren't born deaf, or they say there's a deaf boy, and that boy speaks well. So therefore, you should not permit your children to sign, because if they do, they're never going to speak as good as that kid standing up there.
Susan Conkle is a deaf teacher at the Kendall School in Washington. Like many deaf people, she cannot make her voice coherent. This school is as good a signing school as any parent could find. It uses many methods of communication. This is fingerspelling, where there is a separate finger position for each letter. And sign, where the shape and movement of the hand denotes a word or concept.
West.
The approach used at the Kendall School is called total communication. The teacher signs but also speaks, and the children speak as well as they can.
Good. Okay. How many? 6.
When the teacher uses sign language, she uses it in the word order of English, so as to give the child a better grasp of English structure.
Okay. Now, you want to buy some ice cream? How much money? 8 cents. Good. Right here.
The idea is to prevent deafness acting as a barrier to communication, to put intellectual development before methods of speech.
2 cents.
Always had a place to speak before language. But without language, what motivation is there for them to talk? and what thought and idea are there to put in verbal expression?
How do you think Grumble felt when he got the idea to get the pot of gold? How did he feel? How did he feel? How did Grumble feel? Excited, right. He was excited. So Grumble went and he caught the elf. How did the elf feel? He says, "Take me to your pot of gold." How did the elf feel? Okay, he was probably scared. Right?
We hear the teacher speak, but the children do not. They only see her lips and her signs, yet they can easily follow and enjoy the story.
The pot of gold is under the tree, so he's stuck. How can he get it? Oh, he gets a shovel. Where's the shovel? Home. At home. Okay. Robert? He marked the tree with his scarf.
Oralists say that if children learn to sign, they will not learn to speak. Advocates of sign claim that with no language barrier, they have something to speak about.
Please don't take my scarf off the tree.
For a long time, the hearing people discussed the problem of deafness with other hearing people. But to overcome the problem of deafness is to ask deaf people themselves, because we know what it is like to be deaf.
Rosewood State Hospital, Maryland. A man was confined here for 24 years until it was discovered that he was not mentally retarded, but deaf. The worst examples of the hearing world's ignorance of deafness are when deaf people are found in institutions like this. Unable to speak, to explain they are deaf, they are misdiagnosed.
It's here.
Tom Mead is here at the National Association of the Deaf, reunited with friends. He also spent most of his life in a mental institution.
Tom Mead illustrates society's tremendous ignorance about deafness. Number two, it illustrates that even with good intentions, society tends to neglect and abuse deaf people. Thirdly, it illustrates that when deaf people have no control of the institutions that in turn control deaf people, that you do have the lack of understandings that cause a person like Mr. Mead to spend 33 years of his life in a hospital. And at the most general level, it just illustrates, I think, an insensitivity to a human difference.
It was Dr. Vernon who found Tom Mead at the age of 53 and diagnosed him as having a normal IQ. As a young boy in the 1930s, he was at an oral school, but totally failed to use his voice and communicate. Now, he is learning sign language.
In the Baltimore City school system alone recently, in one school, we found 18 out of 20 deaf students misdiagnosed as mentally retarded. This was Public School 9 in Baltimore City.
On June 12, 1976, Joan Popovich, daughter of a Los Angeles doctor and now an artist, was married to Keith Kutcher. At the age of 3, when she did not speak, she was put in a mental hospital.
Yes, I am bitter. I am not mentally retarded and did not belong in a hospital. My parents were well off, but they didn't understand deafness. They didn't want to keep me, so they got rid of me. Then at school, the kids teased me terribly because I'd been in a hospital. I was very embarrassed. It wasn't my fault. My father did it.
By the time we are 8, most of us know most of our language. At the age of 8, Joan Popovich knew none. It is reckoned that there are several thousand deaf people still undiscovered in mental institutions in the United States.
Only recently, when they list the kind of dangers or illnesses that a person would fear the most, deafness was last on the list. Although, in my opinion, it is the most devastating thing that could happen to an individual. I think that problem is compounded by the idea that people equate deafness with not being able to hear. And not being able to hear is not bad. Deafness is completely different from that. When you can't hear, sometimes think it's a blessing. You don't listen to your wife, you don't listen to the television and commercials. But when you are deaf, there are many, many things that you are excluded from. You don't learn language. You don't learn social customs. You don't learn what's right and what's wrong. You don't learn about the law or the rights of individuals. You learn nothing except what people were concerned to teach you when they feel like it, if they ever do.
Well, it's been a horrible history of paternalism and repression. And I think George Orwell has told us that if you controlled a language, you control a people. And the language of deaf people has been repressed. Sign language has been repressed. In Joanne Greenberg's novel about a deaf couple, the protagonist says, I associate signs with the smell of urine, because the only place the children were permitted to use sign language in the school was in the bathroom.
I am very proud to be deaf, because it is part of me. And I think my language, because it's very expressive and can describe and make a picture speech through sign language. For example, the sun is shining, or reflection of fingerprint under the water, reflection. You cannot apply that in a verbal words.
If language is the basis of culture, then sign language is the basis of deaf culture. Recently, it has been discovered that sign language in the United States, often passed down through deaf families, is not just pantomime or gesture, but a language of extraordinary subtlety. Ella Lentz is a deaf linguistic specialist in San Francisco who comes from such a family.
For example, if I'm talking about the word give, in sign language, the basic form is this, to give. Now, if I were to say, I give to you, it would be like this. You give to me, like this. If I said, he gives to me, like this. If he gives to her, like so. That's why people tend to feel that American Sign Language is a kind of short English, because they say that no pronouns are used here. They don't understand that the pronouns are already included in the signs themselves. Another thing, many people tend to think that sign language is a shortened English, a bad English, or slang English. We should realize that American Sign Language is a language in its own right.
Waterford, Connecticut. This is the headquarters of the National Theater of the Deaf, founded in 1967, now world famous. The actors, most of them deaf, bring sign language to the theater. As sign can be made part of theater, so, like English, it has its own poetry, its own jokes.
Deaf people have in their minds a good sense of humor and a good sense of the grammatical structure of their sign language. Now, let me give you an example of playing on signs. First, well, let me give you a situation. Suppose a science teacher is standing up there lecturing to me, lecturing away with long technical words, and it's all just going right over my head. I don't understand a thing, and I keep watching, but I understand a little bit. And then finally, the teacher asks, "Do you understand me?" And really, of course, I don't. But still, I do understand a little bit, so I answer, "Yes, I understand." Okay, now, the joke is that the real sign for understand is this, with the first finger. Now, we substitute the hand shape using the little finger, like this, which is used for signs like thin or spaghetti, little tiny small things. So you see, understand means I do understand a little.
Ella Lentz's parents, who are both deaf, sent her first to an oral school where she never learned to use her voice coherently. How complex sign language is can be shown by her analysis of a single word.
The basic sign for people is this, people. Now, if you wanted to say many people, you could do it this way. That's one way. Another way is like this. Now, if you're talking about hordes of people, suppose there was a pope, and he's standing up there addressing many people, and we'll choose that term, hordes of people. He's addressing this great group of people, hordes of people like this. And that can relate to a variety of nouns, not just people. Now, hordes of people. Now, suppose a general was strutting down the red carpet, and there are a lot of people lining the sides of the red carpet. These are the rows of people, here. Another way, suppose you're sitting down in a group discussing something. How would you describe that group? Like this.
January 1977. Here the actors of the National Theatre of the Deaf are waiting to rehearse their highly praised production of the opera Four Saints in Three Acts.
From the grass, alas. Pigeons on the grass, alas. If they were not pigeons, what were they? If they were not pigeons on the grass, alas, what were they?
One of the key figures in the development of theatrical sign language is Bernard Bragg. Pigeons on the grass, alas, is really a literal translation, added on top of choreography. Now, in this next example, you'll see how we can extend a sign and how 2 or 3 people can create images together all at once. For example, tree. That's the regular sign. We can adapt that into mime using the entire body. Tree. Thus the arms become branches, and the body becomes the trunk. Also, we have adapted a universal gesture into our language. To while away. While away. Also, we can borrow ideas from comic strips, because our language is completely visual and can be suspended in the air. Like this. The comic strip Balloon, Act 4.
Let it be why if they were adding in a sense of attracting in a sense of adding in a sense of windowing and frames and pigeons and ordinary trees and the Act 4.
The actors at the National Theater of the Deaf have managed to bring their language to millions in the hearing world. How important this language can be is shown by Jimmy Turner. At the age of 18, his only link with the hearing world was through acrobatic performances in the streets of Mystic, Connecticut.
I went to Mystic Oral School. It was like a prison for me. My hands were slapped and put behind my back. Speech instruction was every day for years and years, and I learned nothing. Monday and through the week, I was at school and at home for the weekends, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Then back to school for the week and back home for the weekends. At home, I enjoyed being with my family. We went around together. And it was there I taught myself to act things out in pictures. And I really grew inside. But the school, the oral method was just no good. Acting things out was really wonderful for me. My friends would say something about me, something funny, and they'd laugh and laugh.
3 years ago, Jimmy Turner knew only a few self-taught signs and could not speak or read or write. For every case of a deaf child being put in a mental institution, there are thousands of simple educational failures. The theater has provided a haven for Jimmy Turner, but such a haven is available to few deaf people. Silent Industries, started by a partially deaf man, is the only industrial company in the U.S. catering exclusively to the needs of the deaf. In a world that relies so much on communication, 80% of deaf people have jobs below their level of qualification. While many of the elite among signers may find good jobs among the deaf, teaching or counseling, those signers who cannot reach this must take what work they can in the hearing world. Silent Industries enables deaf people who can only sign to find secure jobs up to their qualification. Life before this has often been a succession of temporary, menial jobs. Bob Kelly.
When I was laid off, I went to San Francisco to get a job as a parking lot attendant there. The union told me I absolutely couldn't because I was deaf. And I told
Many
them
deaf people acquire qualifications they then find they cannot use. Lyle Van Ness is now a supervisor, able to communicate with those under him. Before this, in spite of being qualified as a carpenter, he had a long history of being turned down for jobs. Once he was fired for looking around at work. Unable to use his ears, he relies on his eyes. Another person without well-paying work until he came here is Douglas Schmid.
Before, I was doing auto body painting. I'd finished my schooling, and I went to get a better job. I'd gone along in this job for 17 years without a promotion. I wanted a machinist job, which would be better.
Did you quit?
I was laid off. Deaf people were seen as incapable, and we were rejected by the hearing workers.
In more senses than one, the deaf are a silent minority. They live in the hearing world, but are unseen. In the past, it has been part of deaf pride not to show you are deaf and not to sign in public. Silent Industries is a break from that.
So, since I got this job, it feels like there's more communication with people, with hearing people too. I enjoy myself here. Much better than maid service. That was so quiet and just cleaning up, boring most of the time.
Silent Industries also reveals a deeper problem that goes back to the failure in deaf education.
Well, the first big problem that we found out about when we started here was that we needed special application blanks for the deaf so they could understand what the questions were on the blank, such as one deaf boy came here and applied for a job, and we have on the normal application blank sex, female or male, and he put down yes. So you can understand that he didn't know, he was unaware of what he was being asked.
Silent Industries is an employment haven for about 30 deaf people. In the mid-60s, the government attacked underemployment by founding the National Technical Institute for the Deaf.
It was absolutely apparent that deaf people were underemployed. Some of them were unemployed in rates that were not necessarily in the best interests of the country in terms of what we espouse as a nation. And here was this group, sadly behind, almost neglected insofar as these relative advances were being made.
NTID uses both sign and speech. Sign where it clarifies technical teaching, speech where it improves the job prospects of students. It is having considerable success in finding jobs for its graduates. Its main problem lies not in these students' future, but in their past.
And their desires and their wishes and their needs and their hopes and their aspirations, they're similar to any college group. But when it comes to what are those characteristics that make college students successful, this is then where we have to come to grips with reality. And that includes their abilities to learn independently, to use the library, to use the shops, to use the studios on their own, as it were, to educate themselves and to take full advantage of what takes place in the instructional areas. So that there's this whole question of what are the personal, intellectual, linguistic competencies that a person must possess to take advantage of the materials for learning in a college setting. Our youngsters are way below that.
Reg, we're going to practice some of the words that are used in the videotapes, okay? And these are associated with on-the-job social communication. Time card.
Damn card.
Time card.
Damn card.
At NTID, deaf students may spend as much as half their time working at the same basic speaking skills they've been trying to master for 16 years.
You made it out for this week, okay?
Imagine spending valuable college time learning to speak.
Messages. Messages. Good. Messages. Messages, yes. Are there any messages for me? No messages for me. Nope.
Speaking skills are not the only problem. NTID has found it must teach students the most basic social skills.
I saw your ad in the evening paper. I've come to see about renting a room. The ad said that you had 2 rooms for rent. I would like to see them both.
How to rent a room is not the kind of skill hearing people have to acquire consciously. If they had to do so by lip reading, the situation might be different. It is the need for basic language skills that isolates deaf children in special schools. Isolation is itself a problem.
Many schools for the deaf would not let us out, even to walk to downtown. One school for the deaf I went to years ago, if they found out that I had hearing friends downtown, I went to visit on weekends, boy, I would have been really punished. And at the same time, the really ironic part is that they have been trying to teach us how to talk so that we can communicate with the hearing people. So sometimes I wonder. The other thing is that sex education was not taught in many schools for the deaf. And because of that, we suffer. We come to NTID, and NTID had to offer courses right there to the deaf students to be more aware.
How can I show you through my face that I want a date with you? How can I show you? You look like I want to make out with you? How? How would I do that? Okay, yeah, okay, I can show you through my face, right? I could go. Okay? Would you know what that means? Use a sexy voice? Okay, if I said to him, you want to see a movie tonight? What would happen? What would happen? What do you think?
Communication is the essential problem facing the deaf. At first sight, this seems just a matter of learning words. But without words, they cannot acquire thoughts or experience or manners or knowledge of their rights. This is the meaning of isolation.
Don't be surprised if more than 90% of the deaf students have no communication with their family or parents. What I mean is really good, close talk, or many of the parents say, you upstairs, in really short sentences, and they do not involve them in many discussions of the family. They just let them
JJ's parents are learning to sign, as is his sister. They would like him to talk, but think that signing guarantees at least communication in the family. They made this decision after considering a range of options about a world they are still grappling with.
I can't honestly say. I can imagine the world he's living in. We've often said we're very pleased that if he has to be deaf, he was deaf from birth, because I think it would be very hard to explain to him if he heard first and then lost his hearing. But so to be deaf from birth would seem to me he doesn't really know what he's missing. Maybe that doesn't sound very nice, but I think it's probably easier on him in the long run.
Just take your favorite TV show and turn the volume down for half an hour. That might give you a little inclination, but we all have spoken, heard for a lifetime, not ever having heard and getting that constant input and feedback. No, I really can't totally imagine that. That's very difficult to imagine.